Good morning, Ambassador. It's a great pleasure to have you here at Ukrinform, and it's also a great pleasure to be able to speak with you in Ukrainian.
Thank you. It's also my great pleasure.
A lot has been happening in the geopolitical arena around the issue of resolving the war, and we saw the latest round of technical talks in Saudi Arabia was held just recently. How would you assess what some call progress in achieving a ceasefire being here in Kyiv?
First of all, I'd like to say that we share President Trump's desire to stop this barbaric war Russia has been waging against Ukraine immediately. I think it is now absolutely clear that Ukraine seeks a lasting and just peace. This is also our goal. And Ukraine is demonstrating its readiness for an unconditional and full ceasefire. Now the ball is in Russia's court. Russia must demonstrate practically and realistically whether they are serious about peace. So we are waiting for Russia's response.
President Donald Trump just recently admitted that Russia may be dragging its feet on the ceasefire process. Would you share the opinion that Russia is deliberately delaying the process of settlement while putting forward some demands that are initially unacceptable for Ukraine?
I think Russia's reply so far has been inadequate. Ukraine has made clear that it is for a full and unconditional ceasefire right now. President Trump has made clear that there is a real urgency to stop the fighting immediately, and we've not heard that from Russia. Russia is talking about conditions. Russia is stalling on the question of stopping the fighting right now. And so I think it is really essential that Russia makes clear its position, and if it's not going to be for peace, then we will increase the pressure on Russia and will continue to support Ukraine until Russia comes to the negotiating table.
We're all willing to achieve stable ceasefire guarantees here in Ukraine. And one of those guarantees is the deployment of an international force in some capacity to monitor the ceasefire, to ensure that Russia doesn't breach it. And we recently heard the news that the UK Special Operation Forces have been put on alert, and that may imply that they're getting somehow ready to deploy in some time to Ukraine. Do you have any information on that? Can you confirm that information, that report? And also, what, in your opinion, would be a valid mandate for any international mission? Would that mission be allowed, or should it be allowed, to engage Russian forces in case they breach the ceasefire agreement?
Well, I can't comment on the operations of British forces, but let me just develop two different points that you've made there. Firstly, there is one question which is about how you monitor a ceasefire. And that needs to be given careful consideration to ensure that any violations of a ceasefire have consequences, and that it's very clear if there are provocations, as we've seen before, and ceasefires are broken, who's responsible for those. What we're discussing at the moment among a coalition of the willing is a different element of this, which is how you ensure that Ukraine's security is strengthened and is provided for in the future so that Russia will not attack again. That's underpinning Ukraine's security. And there are several elements. One is strong Ukrainian armed forces. which is why we're continuing to train and equip and develop Ukraine's armed forces. But a second is whether there can be UK and other troops. We've made clear that we would deploy them to Ukraine in the event of a peace deal, to ensure that you have that element too, to strengthen Ukraine's security. And the way in which that will be done is currently under discussion among military planners in the UK, and will also be discussed by leaders in Paris on Thursday.
Well, given that there's willingness to ensure Ukraine's strength, stronger position at the negotiation table, and strength for the future to deter aggression, on March 19th, Foreign Secretary Lamy met with EU's top diplomat Kaja Kallas to discuss acceleration of military supplies to Ukraine, pending the process of achieving ceasefire. Given that Russia keeps intensifying its attacks along the front lines, trying to seize as much land in Ukraine as possible while this ceasefire is being negotiated, how fast do you believe the UK and EU are going or ready to act in this regard to increase military supplies to Ukraine?
We are going to work incredibly quickly on this. In fact, we've already increased military supplies to Ukraine. You'll remember that when the President Zelensky visited London just recently, he signed an agreement to provide a further $3 billion of support to military forces of Ukraine, as well as an agreement to provide 5,000 anti-aircraft missiles from the UK. So our support this year, in the past, we've always provided at least £3 billion of military support every year for Ukraine. But this year, we're providing over 4 billion because we are increasing the amount of resources that are available for military support. We're also seeing that from other countries as well. So Germany, for example, has agreed to increase its support by 3 billion euros. And this is part of a general trend across Europe of increasing defence spending, and in that context, increasing support for Ukraine. The UK has agreed to increase its percentage of GDP spent on defence to 2.5% by 2027. That's a very accelerated timeframe. And that will develop additional resources for our defence spending, for our support for Ukraine. We're encouraging all of our partners to do the same. And if all European partners in NATO were to increase GDP, the percentage of GDP spend to 2.5%, that would be an additional $120 billion of defense spending by NATO countries every year. In other words, the entire Russian defense budget. So there is a general trend here of Europe, led by the UK, increasing defense spending, and in that context, also providing additional support for Ukraine.
Well, the UK has traditionally been a major supporter of Ukraine in terms of military supplies. And one of those things is that the UK has been pioneering provision of high-tech military equipment, including starting from NLAWs, then Storm Shadow missiles, then Challenger tanks, unmanned systems. Also, we know that 67% of Britons support continued military support for Ukraine. They want Ukraine to prevail in this war. Why do you think, while some countries try to distance themselves from supporting Ukraine at this moment of time, why does the UK keep supporting us so much? I mean, it's great, but what do you think is the real reason behind this stance?
I think it's very simple. We know that the security of the UK begins here in Ukraine. So we understand that the defense of Ukraine is also the defense of Europe. It's the defense of international law. It's the defense of the main pillars of security on which the UK depends. So we are not only supporting Ukraine's security, by doing so, we're supporting our own security.
I understand, and one of those points of our cooperation is the 100-year agreement cooperation. And how would you assess its current progress in its implementation? And what key points would you highlight at the moment? So I remember that one of the points is that parties agreed to ensure that Ukraine eventually becomes a NATO ally.
Yes.
And we all see being a member of NATO is probably the best security guarantee for our country. Do you see this point in the same way? Do you share this opinion?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think we see a future of the UK and Ukraine, two flags here, of future NATO allies. And we see Ukraine as being an essential partner for the UK in defending against future threats to Euro-Atlantic security. You've spoken about some of the high-tech systems that we've provided to Ukraine, but what we've also seen is the high-tech systems that Ukraine itself is developing. And increasingly, we're seeing British defense companies engage with their Ukrainian counterparts because we see a common interest in developing those capabilities together and using them in the future to defend the security of Europe.
While I say that NATO, being a member of NATO, is one of the best or the best security guarantee for Ukraine, how would you assess the reports that the US administration is exploring the idea of withdrawing from commanding NATO forces in Europe? Do you think this might be a harbinger of actually the US withdrawing from the collective security idea of NATO? Do you feel that this might be a threat to unity in NATO?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that the US administration and the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, has said very clearly that the United States is committed to the Euro-Atlantic alliance, and there should be no question about that. I think the United States is saying correctly that as we develop the alliance further, there needs to be a greater contribution from European allies. And as I say, the UK is taking a lead on that in increasing defence spending itself and encouraging other countries to do the same.
Another issue in which the UK might be the one nation, along with France, it can take a lead in, is the issue of nuclear deterrence in Europe. We all understand that Russian nuclear threat is out there. We cannot underestimate it. We're not overestimating it either, but still, do you think that your nation, along with France, would be those two countries that could play the key role in nuclear deterrence in Europe?
I think that we continue to consider that the foundation of security in Europe is NATO. It's the Euro-Atlantic alliance. And so we are working very closely with our US counterparts on all those key issues of Euro-Atlantic security, including the issues of bringing a lasting peace to Ukraine, because that is essential. It's an essential element of Euro-Atlantic security for the future.
All right, now a practical question of bilateral relations. President Zelensky has extended visa-free travel for UK nationals until January 30th, 2026. The UK is gradually simplifying the procedure for obtaining visas for the Ukrainians, but a full visa-free travel between the two countries is yet to be put in place. Is the issue now on the table at all in the UK? If not, can we expect it to be brought up anytime soon for visa-free travel for Ukrainians?
Well, first of all, we continue to work on improving the services for getting visas for the UK. We have a visa application center here in Kiev, which is now able to both take in applications and also to provide passports directly here in Kiev. Previously, they had to be issued in Warsaw, but we've improved that situation in recent months. And there is a provision in the agreement that we reached on the 100-year partnership for further talks on this issue between officials. So those talks will be getting underway, and we'll be able to explore how we can improve things further. And of course, we provided a couple of 100,000 visas to Ukrainians to be able to come to the UK under the Homes for Ukrainians scheme since the start of the full-scale invasion. And it's great that many Ukrainians have been welcomed into people's homes in the UK and have been able to find safety there since the war began.
Do you believe they're integrating well into the British society?
I think that they are, of course, many of them looking for the opportunity to come home. And I very much hope that they will have that opportunity soon, which is why it's so important that we work urgently now on an end to the conflict. But I also see that they are both making that contribution to life in the UK, that they are themselves ambassadors for Ukraine in the UK, because so many people in Britain now maybe didn't know about Ukraine before, but now they do. They know Ukrainians personally, and that gives them a really strong personal connection to Ukraine and to Ukraine's defense and what's happening here. One of the reasons why I think there is so much support for Ukraine in the UK is because of that connection that people now have personally through the Ukrainians that they've come to know who've come to the UK.
Let's switch back to Ukrainian, if you don't mind. I would just like to dwell on this question. You know Ukraine, our culture and traditions. You worked here in the embassy in 2003 to 2008, before you took the helm in 2023. What do you think could be the ways we could better convey to the world our Ukraine case? The idea of what Ukraine is. How should we explain to the world that Ukraine is not Russia?
I think that now is a very important moment to share Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian tradition with people around the world. As I said, I think now people know about Ukraine. Thanks to the courage of Ukraine's defenders, they know that Ukraine is not Russia, that Russia is an aggressor, and that Ukraine protects the security of Europe. And they also know Ukrainians on personal level. And this is an important moment. There is a great interest in Ukraine, both in Britain and in other countries. Ukraine has become a thing in the UK. For example, my daughter is now a student at Cambridge. And now all students there have the opportunity to study foreign languages, being offered two options, Spanish or Ukrainian. So imagine what opportunities students now have to learn about Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian language. I think Ukraine should seize this chance.
I guess it's partly because there's certain parallels between Ukraine's current fight and the one Britons had, among others, during World War II. Ukrainians are aware of British series called Foyle's War, where the stories of average people in Britain are shown so well. Their moral dilemmas amid the war, when it's unclear for how long it will last. So we see certain similarities. What parallels do you see here?
На початку Другої світової війни в Британії та в Україні після повномасштабного вторгнення.
Є багато. Наприклад, я думаю, що коли
There are many
Великі
parallels
Британії,
here.
вони чули
For example,
сирени, які лунають тут в
I
Києві,
think that when
то
Britons
це,
heard the sirens going off in Kiev,
це пам'ятає для всіх сирени, які були в Лондоні.
everyone remembered the sirens people heard in London back in the day.
І також війна – це момент, який дуже впливає
Also, the war is a moment that
створення
greatly influences the creation of national traditions,
і для Великої Британії,
national
і
narrative,
для України. То,
both back then for Britain
також
and now for Ukraine.
для нас це було
Also, of course, for us, it was a moment to defend our freedom.
нашу свободу. І,
And now,
також,
for Ukraine,
для
it is
України
also a
зараз
moment
це
to defend
момент
yours.
захистити свободу України.
How did your people tackle war fatigue as the Germans were bombarding cities for 8 months straight?
Бомбардували міста.
Я думаю, що це говорили про
I think it's about the resilience of the British people.
народу. І ще раз, ми пам'ятаємо, що під час
We also remember that during the air raids,
вони були в укриття в
people would hide in underground shelters on the tube.
Underground в Лондоні. То коли ми також бачили подібна ситуація для українців,
And when we see a similar situation in which Ukrainians found themselves, to us it means that we share the same experience. This testifies to both the suffering and the resilience of the Ukrainian people, and that's something that our people showed during World War II.
Напевно, бачите, що
As you see, life in Ukraine goes on, and not all Ukrainian cities apparently have been wiped out. We have a thriving art life, too. I know you go to theaters often, that you like to go to various concerts. Perhaps you have any particular Ukrainian song that warms your heart, or maybe the one you perform for your friends.
яка вам припала до серця. Можливо, ви навіть її співаєте друзям. Я не знаю.
Ну, я знаю, що зараз є справжній театральний бум.
I know that you are seeing a real theatrical boom.
Помітив, що
I often go to theaters,
дуже повний.
and I notice that theater is a very popular.
Художники,
That plays are sold out. You have brilliant artists, directors, actors.
Я був на відкритті першого всеукраїнського
I was at the opening of the first all-Ukrainian Shakespeare festival in Ivano-Frankivsk.
Війна це жахлива, але це також сприяє
This is a terrible war, but it also contributes to Ukraine's revival.
музику, особливо
I really love music,
але також сучасна,
especially church music, but also modern pieces.
Козак Систем і Океан Ельзи.
I know Cossack System,
Дискотеція, воно
Okean Elzy,
такі групи, які
and Pikadiska Tercia.
коли я був тут 20 років тому.
There are the bands that I remember from 20 years ago when I was here.
Багато улюблених пісень.
I have plenty of favorite songs.
Також в посольстві ми створили хор. І ми
We also created a choir at our embassy,
колядку.
and on Christmas Eve we performed a carol. It was a really beautiful and low-profile carol from the Carpathians.
Карпат. І таким чином
In this way, we also learned and tried to understand Ukrainian traditions.
Well, I heard that, by the way. That was amazing. I saw that video and I heard that song.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope that we have more occasions to celebrate, not only to use art as a form of resilience, as a form of staying sane, but also to actually celebrate the good things in our life. And let's hope that the joint efforts of Ukraine and the international community will bring some fruit, and we'll achieve a ceasefire that is stable and that can lead to a just and lasting peace.
I agree. I think it's a key part of our 100-year partnership. We are working on technology, we're working on education, we're working on security issues, but we're also working on culture, because culture is bringing our two countries together. Last Friday, we had a major music festival in the Royal Albert Hall in London of military music with the Royal Marines Band, which is our pride and joy. And for the first time on Friday, they performed with Ukrainian military musicians. And so that was a great expression, not only of our security partnership, but also of how we are sharing our culture together, because Ukraine and the UK are especially close today, and we will be in the future and for the next century.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.